Hello and welcome and namaste from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Gautam Roy. Coming up over the next 30 minutes. After fresh fighting erupted between neighbours on their volatile border, Pakistan's foreign ministry says Islamabad and the Afghan Taliban government have agreed to a 48-hour ceasefire. Blasts also ring out in Kabul. US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth says firepower is coming to Ukraine through Europe, buying US weapons as NATO defence ministers meet in Brussels. And Israel says that one of the 4 bodies handed over by the Hamas overnight does not match any of the hostages. It had earlier threatened to restrict aid into Gaza and delay reopening of the Rafah crossing if handing over of remaining bodies is delayed. Also, Portugal's Cristiano Ronaldo becomes the top goal scorer in World Cup qualifying history at the age of 40. Pakistan and the Afghan Taliban administration have agreed to a temporary ceasefire for 48 hours on Wednesday. That's what Islamabad has said after fresh fighting erupted between the two neighbours. Pakistan's foreign ministry said in a statement that both the countries will make sincere efforts through dialogue to find a positive solution to the complex yet resolvable issue. Earlier, the Afghan Taliban said more than a dozen of its civilians were killed and 100 wounded as Pakistani forces launched attacks in the early hours of Wednesday in the district of Spin Boldak. Meanwhile, Pakistan said 4 of its civilians were wounded in attacks by Taliban forces in the district of Chaman, which is opposite Spin Boldak across the frontier. NATO defence ministers gathered in Brussels on Wednesday for talks to discuss support for Ukraine and defending its border after multiple drone incursions across Europe. Ahead of the meeting, NATO chief Mark Rutte he said the session will focus on how to make our deterrence and defence even stronger, adding that the military alliance and the European Union were working together in their efforts to set up a drone wall to protect member countries from drone incursions. He also said that the EU and NATO have different roles, with NATO providing capabilities on the military side and the EU holding the soft power of the internal market and making sure the money is there.
We'll touch on all those issues and, of course, on what happened just recently, the drones, how to make sure that we can do even more to protect NATO against also these new developments. So this will be an important day. I can assure you that the EU and NATO are really working very well together. There is no doubling at all. Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, myself, the relevant commissioners, including Kubilius and of course Kaja Kallas and the others, we are all making sure that we make use of the strengths of the two organizations.
US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth on Wednesday said commitments from NATO countries will translate into enhanced capabilities. Speaking in the Belgian capital Brussels in the backdrop of the defence ministers' meeting at NATO headquarters, Hegseth said the increase of firepower will benefit Ukraine through the prioritized Ukraine requirements list program, which has been developed by the US and allies to supply Ukraine with new weapons.
Mark mentioned it, firepower. That's what is coming, we expect, and is coming from NATO. And it was a historic summit just a couple of months ago, brought about by leadership of President Trump to say we need our allies to step up. And they did, and they have, in those commitments. Now those commitments will soon translate into capabilities, which is the most important aspect of it. And one part of that, of course, is Pearl, is the initiative where European countries buy U.S. weapons, transfer to NATO for the fight in Ukraine to bring peace to that conflict. And if there's anything we've learned under President Trump, is the active application of peace through strength.
Now, Germany will spend 10 billion euros or 11.62 billion American dollars in the coming years for all kinds of drones. That's what German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius said at a meeting of NATO defense ministers in Brussels. He also said that if Russian President tests the EU's borders, or NATO's borders rather, they will react decisively. Russia's Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak has said on Wednesday that they are ready for dialogue on gas supplies to Europe. Speaking at an energy forum in Moscow, Novak said that the global demand for energy is growing, both regarding hydrocarbons and renewable energy.
Russia
has always been ready and open to dialogue. If the number of reasonable countries seeking reliable and affordable energy cooperation grows, we are prepared to engage. We have the necessary energy resources. As you know, Russia ranks first in gas reserves and second in gas production. We are ready to continue this cooperation naturally, terms of mutual benefit and partnership.
Газа номер один, по добыче страна мы номер два.
And updates from West Asia now. The Israeli army has confirmed that the fourth body handed over by the Hamas has not been matched to any of the captives. The IDF, in a social media post, said this following the completion of an examination at the National Institute of Forensic Medicine. It further said that the Hamas is required to make all necessary efforts to return the deceased hostages. 3 of the 4 bodies of Israeli hostages in Gaza returned by the Hamas late Tuesday have been identified. The slain hostages were identified as 20-year-old Tamir Nimrodi, whose fate was unclear until his body was identified. 35-year-old Uriel Baruch, who was killed in the Nova Music Festival on the 7th of October in 2023, and his body was kidnapped to Gaza. While 53-year-old Ethan Levy, who was missing for over 2 months after the 7th of October attack, before the Israeli army informed his family that he was dead and his remains were held by the Hamas. The Hamas has so far released 20 living hostages and 8 remains under the US-brokered Gaza peace deal, still keeping 20 remains that the Hamas is committed to handing over under the agreement. Meanwhile, 8 trucks rolled into Gaza on Wednesday and Israel resumed preparations to open the main Rafah crossing after a dispute over the return of the bodies of dead hostages that had threatened to derail the fragile ceasefire deal with the Hamas. Israel had threatened to keep Rafah shut and reduce aid supplies because the Hamas was returning bodies too slowly, showing the risks to a truce that has stopped 2 years of devastating warfare in Gaza and freed all living hostages held by the Hamas. However, the militant group returned more Israeli bodies overnight, and an Israeli security official said on Wednesday preparations have been underway to open the Rafah crossing to Gazan citizens, while a second official said that 608 trucks would be going in. Now, the Palestinian Authority says it is prepared to operate a key crossing for aid between Egypt and Gaza. Palestine's special envoy to President confirmed that an earlier agreement with the EU Border Assistance Mission to help manage the crossing remains valid. The crossing, which briefly reopened between February and March, had allowed vital humanitarian aid and medical evacuations for Gaza's healthcare system.
Rafah is a Palestinian-Egyptian matter. We had an agreement in 2005. It's called Access and Movement Agreement. And it does involve the European Eurocops, European police. And the Palestinian Authority police were there, and the Egyptians. So there were 3 parties: Egypt, Palestine, and the Eurocops. Now we are ready to engage again, and we have notified all parties that we are ready to operate the Rafah crossing.
The European Union invited Serbia to join its common joint gas procurement mechanism, EU Commission head Ursula von der Leyen said on Wednesday, as Belgrade seeks to reduce its dependence on Russia, its main supplier. Serbia is almost entirely dependent on gas imports from Russia, which cover over 80% of the country's needs. In June, Serbia's energy ministry said it was working to integrate its gas and electricity markets with those of the EU by the end of 2027.
We are connecting Serbia to the EU's energy market. This is the true guarantee that Serbian families will be safe and warm in winter, and we have concrete projects in motion. We also invited Serbia to join the EU's joint gas procurement mechanism, because together we are using our collective market power to secure better energy prices.
At least 10 people were killed and 18 injured after an oil tanker caught fire in Indonesia's Riau Islands province. The fire broke out at MT Federal 2 while it was docked and was undergoing repairs in Indonesia. Officials informed that the injured have been receiving intensive care at several hospitals. The ownership of the vessel is still unknown. And again in Indonesia, authorities have raised the volcano emergency alert to its highest level after Mount Liutobi Laki-Laki erupted on Wednesday. The roofs of homes in the village of Hikong in East Nusa Tenggara were blanketed by a layer of ash, sand and gravel after a tower of volcanic ash shot 10 kilometers up into the sky. There were no immediate reports of casualties or damage on Wednesday, but authorities have warned residents and tourists on the eastern Indonesian island of Flores to keep away from the mountain and prepare for possible evacuation. The volcano last erupted in August and it also erupted in July, causing flight disruptions to and from the nearby resort island of Bali. Let's now take a look at other stories making news around the world as well. In a sweeping crackdown on drug trafficking, more than 400 police officers have been deployed in a large-scale search operation in Mistral district of Grenoble, located in southeastern France. The operation, which began early Wednesday morning, is part of an intensified effort by French authorities to dismantle organized drug networks and restore public safety in the area. French and international defense and aerospace firms gathered this week at the Unmanned Aerial Vehicle Show in Bordeaux to showcase the latest advancements in counter-drone technology for both military and civilian applications. Among the standout innovations is a high-performing radar system capable of tracking up to 200 aerial targets simultaneously within an 18-kilometer radius. The Louvre Museum has opened a landmark exhibition celebrating the life and legacy of Jacques-Louis David, the revolutionary French painter whose neoclassical masterpieces helped define an era of political and artistic transformation. The show is the first major retrospective of the artist in more than 3 decades, since the 1989 bicentenary of the French Revolution. And still to come in this edition of DD India Live. Kenyan President declares 7 days of state mourning after the passing of former Prime Minister Raila Amolo Odinga. And India's Supreme Court allows a time-restricted bursting of only green firecrackers with QR codes in Delhi NCR this Diwali.
There's so many invaluable artifacts that the British have taken from our country. They robbed us of our self-respect. They robbed us of our honor. Loot was never innocent. It was painful.
The word loot, that was stolen from India too.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Gautam Roy. Raila Odinga, the former Prime Minister of Kenya, passed away at the age of 80. According to reports, Odinga suffered a cardiac arrest on Wednesday. The former PM was the perennial opposition figure of Kenyan politics and was at the center of Kenya's political journey since 1990s. In an address to the nation, Kenya's President William Ruto announced 7 days of national mourning for Raila Odinga.
In honor of the Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga's extraordinary contribution to our nation, I have declared a 7-day period of national mourning during which the national flag shall fly at half-mast across the Republic of Kenya and in all our missions abroad. Our former Prime Minister, Raila Odinga, shall be accorded a state funeral with all attendant honors.
And supporters took to the streets of Kisumu to mourn Kenyan opposition leader Raila Odinga. Many were seen in shock and some held branches as a symbolic gesture of respect.
It's a dark Wednesday for Kenya, and it is a dark Wednesday for the whole world, because today we are mourning an enigma. We are mourning one person who has fought for this country ever since.
The death of Raila has been a shock to us. We as the youth and the ODM champions, we knew Raila as a father. Raila was an enigma. Raila was a pragmatic leader. Raila was a futuristic leader. And Raila Odinga was a man of peace.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi has expressed grief over the demise of former Kenyan Prime Minister. In a post on X, the PM has written, and I quote, "Deeply saddened by the passing of my dear friend and former Prime Minister of Kenya, Mr. Raila Odinga. He was a towering statesman and a cherished friend of India. I had the privilege of knowing him closely since my days as Chief Minister of Gujarat, and our association continued over the years. He had a special affection for India, our culture, values and ancient wisdom. This was reflected in his efforts to strengthen India-Kenya ties. He particularly admired Ayurveda and traditional medicine systems of India, having witnessed their positive impact on his daughter's health. I extend my deepest condolences to his family, friends and to the people of Kenya in this hour of grief." Brazilian Vice President Geraldo Alckmin and Defence Minister José Múcio Monteiro Filho met Indian Defence Minister Rajnath Singh on Wednesday, marking a key step in deepening the strategic partnership between the two major democracies. During the meeting, the leaders discussed a wide range of issues related to defence cooperation and industrial collaboration. They also reviewed ongoing engagements between the two nations and explored avenues to expand cooperation. Speaking at the meeting, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh highlighted the common aspirations and interests of Brazil and India as major growing economies.
Excellency, as two large democracies and growing major economies, we have common interests and aspirations to play a larger role in the international governance and economic architecture. Therefore, our defense and security partnership, I believe, can contribute in furthering international peace and security, safeguarding multilateralism in global affairs, and in preserving the principles of sovereignty and the territorial integrity of nation states.
The International Monetary Fund, in its latest report, has raised India's GDP growth forecast for 2025 to 6.6% from 6.4% in its previous economic outlook forecast in July. The October outlook increased India's growth projection by 20 basis points, reflecting a strong Q1 carryover. The IMF has highlighted that India has recorded the strongest upside surprise among all emerging market and developing economies. And India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal has expressed optimism over the recent growth estimates released by the IMF on India's GDP rate touching 6.6% this year. The minister was speaking to the media on the sidelines of an event in New Delhi.
इंटरनेशनल मॉनेटरी फंड IMF के लेटेस्ट एस्टिमेट्स के द्वारा हमारे इस वर्ष की विकास की दरों में वृद्धि की गई है। IMF ने एस्टिमेट किया है कि अब भारत का ग्रोथ रेट 6.6% हो जाएगा और प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी के नेतृत्व में भारत निश्चित विश्व की सबसे तेज गति से बढ़ने वाली अर्थव्यवस्था इस साल भी रहेगी, आगे आने वाले कई वर्षों तक बनी रहेगी और 2047 तक जो विकसित भारत बनाने का दृढ़ संकल्प लेके देश चला है उसमें हम अवश्य सफलता पाएंगे.
And Piyush Goyal also delivered the keynote address at the plenary session of the Indian Chemicals and Petrochemicals Conference 2025 held in New Delhi. Organized by the Confederation of Indian Industries, the conference highlighted the significant contributions of initiatives like Make in India, PLI, Gati Shakti and the National Logistics Policy. A report on building India's chemical workforce for a $1 trillion industry, underscoring the importance of collaboration between government, academia and industry to foster innovation, sustainability and talent development, was also launched on the occasion. Addressing the conference, the minister highlighted the country's need to ensure supply chain resilience through diversified sources and protecting domestic value chains where needed.
We certainly don't want to be left at the mercy of one geography or even one or two geographies on any item in our supply chains, which can cripple our entire sector. We will need diversified sources. There may be items where we need solid protection and we need to have that domestic value chain in sufficient quantity to make sure our entire sector does not become vulnerable.
India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has said that next-gen GST has been beneficial for the people. Speaking during an event in Koppal in the southern Indian state of Karnataka, the FM added that GST rates on several items have been reduced.
नवरात्रि के पहले से ही हमने उसको पालन किया, इसीलिए बहुत सारे आइटम्स के ऊपर टैक्स कटौती हुई, कम हुई. किसानों के उपयोग वाले वस्तुओं के ऊपर भी टैक्स कम हुआ है. सोलर पावर्ड इक्विपमेंट या आपके ट्रैक्टर, टिलर, एग्रीकल्चरल मशीनरी, पूरे के पूरे जितने भी किसान अन्नदाता उपयोग करते हैं, उन सब में जीएसटी का कम रेट हो गया है, 5% या कभी कंप्लीट वेवर भी हुआ है.
The 5th edition of bilateral maritime exercise Samudra Shakti, hosted by the Indian Navy, is underway at Visakhapatnam. The participating units include INS Kavarati under the aegis of Eastern Naval Command and the Indonesian Navy ship KRI John Lai, a corvette with an integral helicopter. The joint drill will culminate on the 17th of this month. Exercise Samudra Shakti is a key bilateral engagement aimed at enhancing interoperability, strengthening mutual understanding and sharing best practices between the two navies. The exercise highlights shared commitment of both nations towards maintaining stability and peace in the Indo-Pacific region. India's Supreme Court has relaxed firecracker ban conditions in Delhi NCR ahead of Diwali and allowed bursting of green firecrackers from the 18th to the 21st of this month. Bursting of green firecrackers will be allowed from 6 in the morning to 7 on Diwali and again from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. in the evening. The top court said it has to take a balanced approach, permitting bursting of green firecrackers in moderation while not compromising with the environment. The court ordered police authorities to constitute patrolling teams to keep an eye that only permitted products with QR codes are sold, while no firecrackers will be allowed in the Delhi NCR region from the outside. In strict action, the top court ordered that if fake firecrackers are found, licenses are to be suspended. And now let's get you some sports news as well. Portugal striker Cristiano Ronaldo has become the top goal scorer in World Cup qualifying history at the age of 40. Ronaldo netted his 40th and 41st qualifying goals against Hungary to overtake former Guatemala international Carlos Ruiz, who scored 39 goals between 1998 and 2016. Portugal were held to a 2-2 draw by Hungary as Dominic Soboslai struck a stoppage time equalizer after 2 goals from Ronaldo had put the hosts ahead. Ronaldo, also the all-time top international goal scorer with 143 strikes, aims to play at a 6th World Cup in the US, Canada and Mexico next year. India have been fined 5% of the match fee for maintaining a slow over rate during the ICC Women's Cricket World Cup game against Australia. The sanction was imposed by match referee Michel Pereira after the game in Visakhapatnam on Sunday. India were ruled to be 1 over short of the target after extra time was taken into consideration. India skipper Harmanpreet Kaur pleaded guilty to the offence and the proposed sanction. The match went in Australia's favour. And that's all we have for this edition of DD India Live, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. And for those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India's mobile app. It's available on both Android and iOS. Just scan the QR code on the screen and download the app right away. And we'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Gautam Roy, and from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Live.